So now these authoritarian scumbags are openly talking about suspending the writ of habeas corpus. I have a video that I'm going to play, short clip, of Stephen Miller, who is one of the most detestable and loathsome people on the face of the earth, and he is one of the most powerful people in this criminal Trump regime. And he is talking to reporters about the fact that the Trump regime is considering suspending the writ of habeas corpus in order to pick people up off the streets of America that Donald Trump says are in this country illegally. And that's important because without the writ of habeas corpus, without being able to challenge your detention, courts can't even ascertain if someone is in fact here illegally. All Donald Trump has to do is say that they're here illegally, and the government can kidnap them off the streets of America, put them in detention, and then do whatever the hell they want with them. Leave them in detention forever, send them off to a third world gulag, whatever, doesn't matter. And if they get their way, if they do this, and they suspend the writ of habeas corpus, then no one can even challenge their detention. And Donald Trump will be able to do that, what I just described, to anyone. Someone who's here illegally, someone who's here legally, an American citizen who does nothing wrong, maybe someone who just posts something on social media that the Trump regime doesn't like. He can just order your arrest and your confinement, maybe send you to that third world gulag in El Salvador or wherever else. He's going to pay dictators around the world to hold whoever Donald Trump sends to them. That's all he has to do, is just order that they be arrested, and then he could do whatever they want with them. And without the writ of habeas corpus, no one can even challenge their detention. You're an American citizen. You did nothing wrong. Tough shit. You don't even get to tell that to a judge. You can't tell it to anyone. You can tell it to the Trump regime. They don't care, especially if you've criticized them and that's why they've picked you up. They did it for a reason. You're a political prisoner, and what you going to do about it? That's what it means when you suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Now, let's be on the same page about what the writ of habeas corpus is. Not to get too much into it, but it is the right, the fundamental right that everyone in this country, whether you are an American citizen, here legally, here illegally, it doesn't matter. If you are a human being in the United States, you have a fundamental right to challenge your detention. If the government takes you into custody, you have a fundamental right in this country to challenge that detention in a court of law. And this right is so fundamental that it didn't begin with the United States Constitution. It far precedes not only the United States Constitution, but the founding of this country altogether. This comes from English common law, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, before the Magna Carta. But it was specifically put in the Magna Carta. So this has been around for a long time, a fundamental right. And the Constitution mentions the writ of habeas corpus, but does not create the right to challenge your detention. It already presumes, the Constitution itself assumes that right already exists and everyone knows it. And in Article 1, it says that the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended except for a certain limited set of circumstances which it lays out. But it talks as if everyone knows that everyone already has the right to challenge your detention. Well, then came the Trump regime. And they want to make it so that you don't have that right. And who cares what the Constitution says? Who cares what hundreds upon hundreds, nearly 1,000 years of English common law judicial history says? This is the new era. This is the Trump regime. We do whatever the hell we want. Now, here's an article from CNBC, and I'll link any articles I talk about here. Trump administration looking at suspending habeas corpus for migrants, Stephen Miller says. Let me just read a little bit of this. White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, the aforementioned scumbag Stephen Miller, said Friday that the Trump regime is actively looking at suspending the writ of habeas corpus, the constitutional right to challenge in court the legality of a person's detention by the government. Miller's comments came in response to a White House reporter's question, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, let me get to his comments. But before I do, here's what prompted all of this. This is from yesterday as well. So Stephen Miller's comments came just hours after this news broke. Vermont federal judge orders Rumeysa Ozturk to be released from custody. This is the foreign graduate student at Tufts University who many weeks ago now was essentially kidnapped off the streets of Massachusetts by federal agents who were they were not wearing uniform. Some of them were in masks. They did not identify themselves, at least not at the beginning. Picked her up off the street and whisked her away, not just to jail, but they took her out of the state. They sent her off to Louisiana in defiance of a court order that said, do not take her from this jurisdiction. They did. Took her to Louisiana. We've had other judges since then saying, you have to bring her back. And now we have this judge in Vermont saying, you must release her. Let me just read a little of this article that I showed you. Again, this will be linked. This is from May 9th. A federal judge in Vermont on Friday ordered that Rumeysa Ozturk, a Turkish graduate student who has spent the last 6 weeks in federal immigration custody, including briefly in St. Albans, be immediately released from detention. U.S. District Judge William K. Sessions III's ruling came at the end of a 3-hour hearing at the federal courthouse in Burlington that saw Ozturk, who is in the final year of a doctoral program at Tufts University, take the stand remotely over video from a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention center in Louisiana. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit and seated next to one of her attorneys in a room with plain white walls. Let me skip down. Ruling from the bench on Friday afternoon, Sessions appeared almost surprised that federal officials had not, he said, pointed to evidence other than the op-ed. Remember, she wrote an op-ed in the Tufts student newspaper criticizing the administration and the school administration on their, I think it had to do with their position on the Israeli, Gaza war. So she wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper. And this judge is surprised that the Trump regime pointed to no evidence other than the op-ed for why they arrested Ozturk in the first place, saying the student had raised, quote, a very substantial claim that her rights under the First Amendment had been violated. Yeah, you're damn right she raised a good claim. Absolutely her First Amendment rights have been violated. Not even a close question. In addition to violating her own rights, Sessions says, Ozturk's detention also, quote, chills the speech of the millions and millions of individuals in this country who, like her, are not U.S. citizens. And by the way, anyone in this country has the freedom of speech. Doesn't mean there's not certain consequences. The problem is she's here on a student visa, which the government has broad discretion to revoke, but not for things that are not constitutional. Or you can't revoke a student visa for someone engaging in First Amendment protected speech. You can't do that. At least I would certainly make that argument, but we'll see what the courts say. Let me read a little more. Toward the end of Friday's hearing, the prosecutor representing the government, acting U.S. Attorney for Vermont, Michael Drescher, made only brief arguments for why Ozturk should be kept in custody and did not call any witnesses. So they made they offered no evidence, they called no witnesses. The lawyer just stands up and gives some half-assed reason for why she should remain in custody and pretty much only points to the op-ed for what she said. A student said in a student newspaper. The government has maintained that, in its view, Sessions lacks jurisdiction over the student's case, which should instead be litigated entirely within the federal immigration system. So basically, the Trump regime has no argument, no legal argument, no evidentiary basis for holding this woman. They simply say, Judge, you don't have any jurisdiction. And let me tell you something. If that's your only argument, you're going to lose. I mean, judges really don't like it when you're telling the court you don't have any jurisdiction. Now, jurisdictional arguments are legitimate, but you better have some meat on the bones there. And they offer none. They're just saying, hey, this is immigration and you have no right to get involved, which is flatly contrary to the law. This is a writ of habeas corpus, challenging her detention. That's a fundamental right, whether this is, an immigration situation or not. So let's now get to this statement from this detestable scumbag, Stephen Miller. So let me pull this jerk off up here. No, I don't want that. There we go. Go.
President Trump has talked about potentially suspending habeas corpus to take care of the illegal immigration problem. When could we see that happen, do you think?
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day...
All right, let me just stop this. I can't take this guy. Look at this smug prick. Let's talk about the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, shall we? Because saying that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land is pretty much the only thing that he got right. Well, it is true that the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in certain very limited circumstances. But the question is, who gets to suspend the writ of habeas corpus? This jerk says that the president gets to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Well, what does the supreme law of the land, as Miller refers to it, the Constitution, what does the Constitution have to say about who gets to suspend the writ of habeas corpus? Why don't we take a look at it? Here is Constitution Article 1. Now, before I get to this, let me just explain, for those of you who aren't too familiar with the Constitution, the main parts of the Constitution, Articles 1 through 3, set up the three branches of government. This is where the separation of powers comes from. Article 1 creates Congress and lays out what Congress's powers are. Article 2 sets up the presidency and lays out what the president's power is. Article 3 creates the judicial branch and sets out what its powers are. The writ of habeas corpus, the talk about suspending the writ of habeas corpus, can be found in, my computer's not working with me here. Okay. Can be found in Article 1, which deals with Congress. Right here, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. In these various other sections under Article 1, it lays out the powers of Congress. And you will find in Article 1, where is it? Maybe the Section 9, I think. Is it Section 9? Where the hell is it? Okay, yeah, Section 9. Right here. Second paragraph of Section 9. In Article 1, laying out the powers of Congress, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended, unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. So, which branch of government do you think has the authority to suspend the writ of habeas corpus when the suspension is explicitly referenced in Article 1, which lists the powers of Congress? Clearly, it is only Congress that can suspend the writ of habeas corpus, not the president. And if we look at the specifics of it also, so I mean, it's very clear, very, very clear that it is only Congress that can suspend the writ of habeas corpus. And this has been litigated by the courts already. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln famously suspended the writ of habeas corpus illegally and unconstitutionally. And the courts so ruled, said that what he did in suspending the writ of habeas corpus was illegal and unconstitutional. And so then Congress went ahead and passed legislation temporarily suspending the writ of habeas corpus, so making legal what Abraham Lincoln was trying to do. But the court said very clearly that doing so through the presidency, the president doing it unilaterally, is flatly illegal and unconstitutional. Only Congress can do it, which is very, very clear because they put it in Article 1. So it's not even debatable that it's only Congress that has the authority to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. But when we look at the specific language of this, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. And again, it doesn't say that there shall be the right to the writ of habeas corpus. The Constitution is not creating it. Listen to how it refers to it. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. It already exists. It's not creating the writ of habeas corpus, the right to challenge your detention. It already presumes that that right exists and everyone acknowledges it. And says that that right shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, public safety may require it. So not just because, first of all, there need to be rebellion or invasion, right? In order for even Congress, the president has no authority to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, but even for Congress to exercise their power, there must, to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, there must be either rebellion or invasion. None of that is what we're talking about here. Trump wants to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, or they're considering it, for people he says are here illegally. That's not a rebellion, and that's not invasion. And even if there were an ongoing rebellion or an invasion, that alone would not be enough either. Public safety would have to require the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. It must be so bad, the rebellion and or invasion must be so bad that public safety demands that you cannot ensure public safety without suspending the writ of habeas corpus. So those are the conditions, even for Congress to suspend the writ, and it's only Congress who can. So you'd have to have rebellion, invasion, one of those, and suspending the writ is the only way to preserve public safety. None of those things exist here. There is no rebellion, there is no invasion, and public safety is not an issue here. It does not demand that people be held without the ability to challenge their detention. Now, you could make an argument that people here illegally, some of them who might be committing crimes, are a threat to public safety. But that's not the question. The question is suspending the writ of habeas corpus the only way to ensure public safety? And of course not. You can go and arrest those people, put them in jail, detain them. But you have to produce them for a court pursuant to the writ of habeas corpus so that that person can challenge their detention. No one says you have to leave them free. You can arrest them, but you must allow them the ability to have a hearing and challenge their detention. That's it. And the only way that Congress can invoke this is to say that, look, this situation is so bad and such a threat to public safety that to bring them before a judge would endanger public safety. So we have no choice but to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. That's absurd. None of this exists. So it would even be illegal, unconstitutional, per Section 9 of the Article 1, for even Congress in this circumstance to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. So this is some real authoritarian shit. Now, I don't know if they're serious about this. You never know with these people. You never know if they're just shit talking or they're serious. And I don't put it past them. I mean, look at the stuff they've already done. Right? We know they want to hold people without due process. They're doing it in violation of court orders, in violation of the Supreme Court. So they may very well be serious about this. They might be also just trying to intimidate judges. They could just be doing that. This could be a trial balloon to see what the pushback is. And to that point, this really pisses me off. I want to play the beginning of this clip of the detestable scumbag Stephen Miller. Let me bring this back here. Take a look. Listen to the reporter. Okay, listen carefully to this reporter.
You know, President Trump has talked about potentially suspending habeas corpus to take care of the illegal immigration problem. When could we see that happen, do you think?
Okay, I don't know who this reporter is, but he just says, so you're thinking about suspending the writ of habeas corpus to deal with immigrants. When might we see that happen? It's just a normal question. Like any just routine issue. Oh, when might we see that happen? Oh, we hear Donald Trump is going to be playing in another golf tournament pretty soon. When might that happen? No outrage in the question. Nothing in the question about this being like flagrantly illegal. Nothing like that. Just, oh, when might we see that happen? This is how the press contributes to the legitimization of the illegality and unconstitutionality coming out of this White House. This is how they play right into it. They talk about it as if it's no big deal. Oh, so when might you start suspending the writ of habeas corpus? I.e., when might you be kidnapping people off the streets and just denying them access to the courts? When can we expect that to start happening? Are you freaking kidding me? And this is also what you get when one of the three branches of government, the branch of government, Congress, that is supposed to be the most powerful under our system, they have the most power over how this country operates. Very clearly from the construction of the Constitution. And if you read what the framers said about the Constitution they were creating and created, they intended for Congress to be the body with the most power. The courts were supposed to be the least powerful. Congress was supposed to be the most powerful. That's how they viewed it. That's not what we have. We have a Congress who has decided, yeah, we don't want to do anything. We don't want to act as a check on this president. We are way too fucking scared for that. We just want to get reelected. So please don't expect us to do anything. He might post a mean tweet about us, and we can't have that. So yes, go ahead. Suspend, kidnap people. That's fine. No, you don't have to bring him to court. You go ahead and you suspend that writ of habeas corpus, and we ain't going to say shit. If we had a Congress that was doing what it was supposed to be doing, if they were true to their oaths to the Constitution, they would be out there right now going, don't you even think about it? We will start impeachment proceedings the very next day if you suspend the writ of habeas corpus. You have no authority to do that. There are no kings in this country. We settled this question long ago. It was settled before we even became a country. You do not get to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. You have no such power. Only we have that power, and only for a very limited set of circumstances which do not exist in this situation. So don't you even fucking think about it, or we're going to impeach you like that. No, that's not going to happen. That's what should happen. Not going to happen. We'll have a bunch of cheerleading on Fox. We'll have Fox legal experts going on TV to tell their audience how, oh yeah, of course the president has the authority to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Of course he can arrest people and hold them indefinitely without allowing them access to the courts. Of course. And of course the Constitution gives that power to the president, even though it's in Article 1. They're not going to mention Article 1. Article 1, phew, that would go right over their heads. What's Article 1? Did someone write an article? What are you talking about? Well, we don't read. We don't know nothing from no articles. If it's not on Fox News or on Facebook, we don't know shit about it. Anyway, the whole thing makes me friggin' sick.